When you go to combat, you can't even paint the full picture for anybody at home. I'm ready to come home alive at any means necessary.
I turned into a person who took all of that emotion, all of that guilt, all of that anger, all of that frustration. I put it into like a little box and I just fucking buried that bitch as deep as possible inside me.
Once you have to put a poncho liner over 3 dead Marines, it changes everything.
People always used to tell me, there's a purpose for you in life. God has a purpose for you. They gotta not have a purpose. My brothers, I'm like, I don't get it.
Orders, get your gear on, stay low. Let's go, let's go. Spread out, squadron, spread them out.
I remember telling Dunham, hasty vehicle searches. I could see he was listening to me, but he was also looking down the line of cars. He saw something.
We come up on this white SUV. As soon as I hit the second door, I see it. AKs and RPGs in the back seat.
I looked up and I saw Miller running.
Dunham's got the guy on the ground and they're fighting.
Jason was on top of him. He said, no, 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 watch his hands. And the grenade went off.
It's like a slideshow. Jason's body just like goes up and then his head just comes back down flat. Not many people are within a foot of a grenade and can tell you about it.
Hey, two parties!
Anybody outside dies right now, practical. I don't care if you believe in God or not. Whenever your friends went down, you found God. Stand by, get ready. Hang in there, we're gonna get you out of here. We loaded him up on a bird. Told him, you're going home. Go see your family.
On a dusty road in western Iraq, Corporal Dunham gave his life so that the men under his command might live.
What do you say to the parents of the guy who gave his life for you? Like, what do you tell them? Fuck.
Just that single moment of selflessness, he put the challenge to us all. How will we live? How will we make a difference?
I just try to remember who I am and what I'm expected to be to my Marines.
Jason gave me my life for his, so I have to be good enough to accommodate both.
I would have taken the spot in a heartbeat. I wanted to do my job that day, and I wasn't able to. And that's something I have to live with now.
What happens on that hill, in that Humvee, in that Amtrak, on that helo, on that dusty road will be with you that day, 15 years later, and the day before your death. That encounter changes you for the rest of your life.
All that we have has been given to us.
What we do with what has been given.
It's how we honor those who gave.
Take what you're given, make it count, and don't stop.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Red, White, and You Show with the Military Medium. This episode being sponsored by Trailblazing Communications, tools for taking back your life. Today I have with us Navy veteran and director David Kniess here to talk to us about his latest project, The Gift. David, welcome to the Red, White, and You Show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So if you could, for the viewers and the listeners, who's David Kniess?
Well, I was born in Pittsburgh, raised in Connecticut, spent some time in the U.S. Navy as a boatswain's mate aboard a guided missile cruiser. When I got out of the Navy, I went back and finished school, television production, found my way to Los Angeles, and worked in sports for years, Fox Sports. And then I migrated over to DirecTV Entertainment, where I worked as a producer and editor. Mostly on behind-the-scenes type stuff in the promo world, trailers. But I've always dabbled with documentaries. My first doc I did was probably, actually it's 20 years ago this year. I had a teacher in high school who was a Marine. He fought at Kniess. And initially I was going to write a screenplay about it.
Sure.
And he said, I'm going back there. So I was like, wow. He's like, do you want to come? So I said, absolutely. So I bought some cameras and took that journey with him, and that kind of got me the documentary bug. It's just because it's real. It's so much more real than any screenplay or movie you can watch. You're actually living it with them.
Right.
So that's what got me started. And fast forward to, I don't even remember what year it was, but it was before 2004. I had a chance meeting with Jason Dunham, and then later on I found out he was killed. And I wrote a little story about it, and I shared it with my teacher and a bunch of other Kniess Marines, and they posted it on their message board for their reunion website. And somehow that ended up in Jason's hometown paper, and then I got a phone call from his mother. And I didn't answer the call. I didn't know the number, but she left a voicemail and told me who she was and that she wanted me to talk to her about her son and meeting him. And I didn't call her back at first because I just didn't know what to say to her.
Sure.
It was what do you say? And then she called again 2 weeks later, and I let it go to voicemail again, and I sat there for a half hour at least, and I finally said, you got to call this woman. So I picked up the phone, and that turned into a 2-hour conversation with her and her husband. And
wow.
30 days later, I was on a plane to upstate New York, and I spent a long weekend with them and went to the cemetery, paid my respects, and that's kind of how this all started. I initially started a scholarship foundation for him with another Marine, Kniess Marine, and we kind of focused on that. And at the same time, the Kniess guys were pushing me to do a story on Jason, and I finally decided to, and I started interviewing his Marines as they came back. While it was just, it was too soon, long story short, it was too soon. They weren't ready, I wasn't ready. It was just, it was an emotional 6 or 7 interviews I did, and then I kind of put it on the shelf, and as the years went by, I always stared at those hard drives with all those interviews, and these guys gave me footage that they shot in Iraq, different missions and stuff, and I always told myself I need to finish that. And a friend of mine who I moved out here with, he's also a Navy vet and works in TV, we sat around one day and said, we need to do our own thing. And he brought it up. He said, well, what about Dunham? And that started it. I called Deb and Dan. You know, I stayed in touch with them over the years. And, you know, gracious people. I mean, they're like parents to me, you know. And all those Marines, I essentially became friends, really close friends with his parents and all his Marines. So for 15 years, 16 years now, I've been there for all of it, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know, of what they've gone through. The troubles, the successes, everything. So, yeah, so here we are now, and we're making a go of it.
Crazy. And beautiful at the same way. And for those that haven't seen the clip, and obviously we'll make sure that's available. You know, The Gift is a documentary film about Medal of Honor recipient Corporal Jason Dunham and the men of Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. And then, of course, in April of 2004, Corporal Dunham was severely wounded after smothering a hand grenade dropped by a Iraqi insurgent during an ambush. And basically, he saved the lives of his fellow Marines, and then basically succumbed to his injuries 8 days later. Pretty powerful stuff. You know, you always hear in the military that, you know, those scenarios about jumping on grenades and different things. And you know, I guess as a soldier, really hope that day never comes. But I know it's always probably in the back of most people's minds, like, what would somebody really do in the face of that adversity? And I find it interesting as well, as we do this interview, today is Memorial Day.
Correct.
What a fitting day to do this interview in memorial to him. You know,
Absolutely.
but you know, interesting. I know, you know, when you were doing the interviews, and I watched the clip, the sizzler, if you will. Now, we're just a raw emotion and everything with the Marines that were with him. Now, you guys were trying to, this kind of came out in January, is that correct?
Yeah, we started our campaign actually on Veterans Day this past fall. And our whole idea was to try to raise initial funding to get it started. So I kind of put a plan in place, you know, in the beginning. I said, listen, I told my co-producer, I said, I want everybody working on this to be a veteran. I want to know why they're there. You know, you can hire camera people, audio people who are there for the job, but I know if we have a group of veterans that it's going to be extra special, and they're going to be, their heart's going to really be in it. So that was my plan, you know, to reach out to people in the veteran community, like Jocko and Vince Vargas, these leaders basically, and gain their support. And that's exactly what happened. You know, I have a friend who is a comedian actor, Jamie Kaler, who served as an officer in the Navy. And we had a conversation one day. I said, can you put me in touch with Vince? And he said, absolutely. So I sent Vince the sizzle. He got back to me right away. And I said, hey, are you interested in helping us produce this? He said, absolutely. So he came on board, and that led me to Jocko, because Vince knows Jocko. I said, we really need to get these guys on his podcast, the guys who were there, the two Marines who stood right next to him. You know, I've listened to Jocko's podcast, and it's a very historical recount of different episodes in different military people's lives, and I knew that he would want that. So I reached out to him. You know, Vince said, here's his email. And I emailed him and said, I've been following you. I listen to what you do. It's amazing stuff. I said, we're doing a project on Jason Dunham, Medal of Honor recipient Jason Dunham. How would you like to have the two Marines who were standing right next to him when that grenade went off? And he got back to me within 12 hours and said, absolutely. So we set that up. And it seems like every door I go through leads me to another door. And I tell a lot of people, when I first started this, I really had to push it, you know, and really get people to pay attention to what it is we want to do. And now it's pushing me. You know, I'm not driving the ship anymore. It's on its own course, and I'm just following it. I'm following whatever calls I get or people contact me, and things seem to happen, you know. So we started that campaign. I got some press on military.com, We Are the Mighty, Task and Purpose. And on Christmas Eve, I got an email from this guy. And he said, I just read your article they did on you on military.com. And I'd like to talk to you about, you know, helping fund this. So I said, okay. I said, let's talk the day after Christmas. On December 26th, I called this guy, and we were on the phone for 2 hours. And he asked all those he wanted to know who I was and why I was doing this. And then finally, after I told him the whole story, how this came about, how I met this kid, at the end of the conversation, he said, well, I'd like to come in for the whole thing. And I said, excuse me? He's like, I'd like to fund the whole thing.
Beautiful.
And I couldn't believe it, you know. But he understood because he was a Marine.
Right.
You know, served during 2004, went back to school and became a successful person. So he said, I can do this. And I always thought in the back of my mind when we started this, wouldn't it be great if we found somebody, a veteran, who would be willing to step up to help us with this? And it happened. So
crazy.
I mean, it's a blessing, really.
Right.
So we've been working with him, and obviously we're on hold right now because of all the pandemic stuff.
Sure.
But you know, the plan is to get back on the road here next month, hopefully. Or at least here in California, there's a few veterans we need to interview. But yeah, we hope to be shooting all summer long to finish this up and put it into post-production.
Is that when they're looking at hopefully tentatively opening back everything up as far as shooting again next month?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think we can. It's still iffy right now, but I think we can. I've got a guy up in Eureka, Kelly Miller, who was with Jason that day, and we can drive up to Eureka and shoot his interview. And then Billy Hampton, the other guy standing there with Jason when that went off, he lives in Washington, so we could just keep going, drive up to Washington, and you know, kind of do those two interviews in June, and then hopefully July will open to the point where we can just hit the road, because we've got to go to Oklahoma, Chicago, New Mexico, all the way up to Maine, like on the border of Canada, Maine.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Where his former commanding officer lives. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, very cool. Very cool. So if somebody else is out there that wants to get involved with your project or just show some support in some way, what are some of the ways they can do that?
Well, they can go to our Facebook page or our Instagram page. It's at The Gift Documentary. We're on Twitter as well, at The Gift Doc. And, you know, they can show their support there by following us and joining us. If somebody wants to donate to the project, we're still taking donations. You know, it's going to cost quite a bit of money. But yeah, mostly just social media support. I mean, that's where everything's going, right?
Right.
I mean, it's been really good for us. I mean, we've built up a pretty good following. So that's basically where they can go and support us.
You know, I just looking at this here, talking about focusing how the events of that day have affected the men over the past, at this time, 15 years, and through drug and alcohol abuse, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injuries, you know, and of course, in some cases, suicide. That's a pretty important story to tell as well. Don't
you know, the story. I mean, the story is it's about Jason. The beginning of it, it's about Jason. The real story is how it affected his Marines.
Sure.
And that journey they've taken from that point until now. You know, some of it's been bad.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of it that's been good. You know, guys who've had their troubles, but they've turned it around and have done things with their lives to move on and move forward. And every day it gets better. You know, and that's the real story, how they've bounced back from that. Because for these guys, that was the defining moment in their lives. You know, to be in a situation like that, and to have someone like Jason do what he did, it weighs heavy on them. There's a lot of guilt, you know, a lot of these guys say, why couldn't I do more? You know, there's one guy who was his point man who was ordered to stay with the vehicles that day, but he was his point man on every patrol, and he blames himself. He said, it should have been me. He wouldn't have had to go up to that vehicle. It would have been me. So he has a hard time with that, and he's starting to learn that it's okay now. You don't have to take all that on your shoulders, you know. And the interesting thing about Jason was, getting back to your discussion there about, you know, young soldiers and Marines who do this, nobody knows what they're going to do. But the interesting thing is, he practiced this. There was a conversation he had with his Lieutenant Bull Robinson, and his staff sergeant, John Ferguson. They were talking about, Jason said, well, what would you do if, you know, an insurgent rolled out a grenade? And, you know, the lieutenant said, well, you couldn't do much, you know, you got like 2 or 3 seconds. And he's like, well, what if you took off your Kevlar and put it on it? And the lieutenant's like, man, that'll mess you up. You might, you know, slow the blast down a little, but you're still going to get killed or hurt really bad. He said, plus you wouldn't have time. He's like, I bet you I could do it. So he's like, all right, go get your gear. So he went and got his Kevlar, came out, loosened up his strap, and he said, okay, sir, tell me when to go. And he said, go. He dipped his head, the strap came open, he caught his Kevlar in midair and slammed it on the deck within 2 seconds, a second.
Crazy.
So when all that happened, when the grenade came out, they knew. They were like, God damn, he did it. That's what he did, you know? So it's interesting.
Yep. It is interesting. You know, one of the things I was going to ask is, in your time with this project, who have you, I guess, what have you uncovered as the individual who Jason Dunham is, in a sense? What have you learned about Jason?
As a person?
Yeah, you know, that you want to share with everybody else. What have you found out about Jason that you want to share with the rest of the world?
I think, you know, Jason Dunham was the kind of person who loved his Marines, number one, and he was a leader, and a lot of senior NCOs have said it time and again. He said, you know, this kid had a leadership quality that I didn't understand or achieve until I was, 10 years in the Corps. But he had the understanding of, you get boots coming in, you don't shit on them. You
Right.
take them under your wing and you lead them and you teach them. And anytime they had to do that, fill sandbags or whatever, a lot of the other squad leaders, the corporals, were, okay, guys, get it done. He was right there with them. Mm-hmm. And they knew. And they respected him for that. So he was a very respected leader who loved his Marines. And, the other thing about him I've learned from his parents is just how loving and caring he was towards his family. And when I first met them, because when I first met Jason, he's like one of those people you meet that there's something special about this guy, or any person you meet, whether it's at a picnic or whatever, you're like, wow,
Right.
this is a great person. I don't want the day to end.
Right.
And that was the impression I got. So when I met his parents and saw how they were with me, I understood why he was the way he was. I mean, these people open they never met me before. I showed up on the doorstep with my, I didn't have my bags with me. I just showed up on the doorstep and she said, where's your bag? And I said, oh, I checked into that little motel in town. She's like, Dan, go get his bags. You're staying here with us. And they just opened their house up to me. And, I have a relationship with them now. Anytime I get off the phone with them, she says, I love you. They're like parents to me. So it's the way they raised him. He carried that into the Marine Corps. And, his actions were a gift, but also the actions of what he did. But these Marines that he served with also take who he was as a person. And they all of them instill that now, till this day in their life, to be better.
That's
to
beautiful.
not be that, you know, jerk or whatever.
Sure.
Just to be a caring person and care about the people around you.
You know, interesting how you talked about, you know, and I'm sure you saw this in the Navy as well, but, you know, leaders can be entrusted with other, you know, soldiers, whatever. But it doesn't mean that they have to give a shit about those individuals, right? It's like, oh, they're just another face in the crowd or whatever, right?
Right.
But it takes somebody special to actually care about, like you talked about the boots, right? That just came in from Paris or wherever they were coming from. But, you know, that new recruit that a lot of people don't give two craps about, and usually gives the crappiest duties, always gets, you know, the worst of the worst. But at the same time is when somebody shows a little bit of compassion and a little bit of guidance and mentorship, that can speak volumes. And,
Right.
you know, I guess in my assessment, that's something that typically cannot be taught as a leader. That's something that it's like an internal trait.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we've all, and I'm sure you've run across it too, being in the Army. We all come across those leaders, right?
Right.
You know,
Everybody
you can look
does.
at that guy and say,
Right.
I'll follow that guy.
Right.
The other guy, you're like, I don't know about him.
Right. I wouldn't
Because you know
follow
they
Bill
don't
with
care.
train, right?
They're either more, you know, worried about their career of advancement, and the other person's like, well, I don't care about that. I want to make sure you guys are good to go.
Right. Right.
But and you see that in business. You know, I've worked
Yep.
in the corporate world here at entertainment, and I only know 2 leaders that I worked for. You know, and it's a simple thing as a guy stopping by my edit bay, my edit suite where I work on a Friday, and he's, you know, he's like the post manager. He doesn't have to do that, but he'll come by. Hey, how's your week been? What do you got planned this weekend? All right, well, listen, man, I'm heading home. I'll see you Monday. I hope you have a good weekend. That 5 minutes, you look at him differently. Like he cares.
Right.
You know? So.
That speaks volumes to the individuals that they are, and and the people out there that does this. And obviously, in this case, we're talking about Jason, and just, you know, the volume of individual, the energy and the, you know, that he carried with him and really exuded off of and into his Marines, right? You were talking about that you're hoping that hopefully this fall to be getting into post-production on the project. Is right now, I was going to say, I guess I was going to go back and, cause you already answered it. It's going to sound like going back, but I was going to say,
okay.
if you're needing, still financial support for the shoot, but I know you said that, if folks still want to support, and I know that you
Right.
said the, an individual had reached out to you some time ago, which I think is so awesome. And you know, the great thing is sometimes all you have to do is have the ask out there, right? Or get on different platforms to open one door to tell the story of not only Jason, but the project that is carrying his message forward, and
Right.
people want to get involved at some level, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I love how you talked about when you open up one door, or when you walk through one door, you use the analogy of other doors were opening for you. And now in the beginning, where it was felt like you had to push this project to get the momentum,
Yeah.
now it's taken on a life of its own.
It's yeah, I've been, you know, it's one of those things where, and I said this to somebody recently. I made the analogy of, you know, because I didn't know if when you're so close to something, you don't know, you know,
Right,
is
right.
it a good story?
Right.
Is it, you know, has it already been told? Because I'm so close to it, I think
Right.
it's great, right? But
Right, yeah.
will other people think it's great? And it's hard to, because I'm so close, it's hard to to see that objectively, right? So it's kind of like a chef who cooks for a living and, you know, taste it. I don't know. Is it good? You know?
Right.
But, you know, the more time I spend with these Kilo guys and the more time I spend with people like Vince and Rocco or Jocko, I'm starting to realize that, yeah, this is an important story.
Yeah.
You know, not just the act itself. You know, a lot of people, a lot of times, you know, they concentrate on the glory, right? The Medal of Honor and the glory of it.
Sure, sure.
But there's so much more that goes into that. And I had a conversation recently with Clinton Romachet, and I talked about how, you know, people look at you and think of, all they think about is a Medal of Honor. You know, they don't realize what kind of weight that carries with you personally, you know, the weight on your shoulders and in your heart, because it's, let's face it, that's the worst day of your life, you know, and you didn't do something to get a medal, you know, it's so much more, because you're the one that has to walk around now and think about those people who died that day and your reactions.
I can only fathom what that's like, because now that becomes part of, you know, their name becomes synonymous with that. It becomes part of their title, right? Oh, you're the Medal of Honor recipient. Like, oh, I remember.
Yeah, and Jason's parents kind of go through that too. You know, not so much now, but early on it was, you know, nonstop. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. The glory of it.
The glory.
And they're dealing with their own grief. They're like, we lost our son, you know, and I couldn't even fathom what that's like. I have 2 kids. It's just that really tugs at my heart as well. And these Marines, they carry that too. You know, it's the medal. It's, you know, going to the White House for the ceremony.
Sure.
Going to the christening of the ship. And, you know, for Kelly Miller, that was too much at one point, where he's like, you know, I can't keep doing this. It's just, it's because it's so heavy for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you keep reopening that wound every time.
Yeah.
Because people are asking you to go back to that time. Like, I think you summarized it really well, is everybody else sees the medal, but guess what? The reason that they got the medal is because the worst day in their life, right?
Right.
And, you know, they did some pretty heroic shit to get that, but here's the deal. That's just who they are. And, you know, they weren't thinking about, hey, I'm going to get a Medal of Honor. Hold my beer, watch this shit. Well, you know, it's not that. So it's, you're absolutely correct. Again, if you guys are just joining us, our guest today is director and Navy veteran David Kniess, talking about his current project, The Gift, which is a documentary about, here we use the label again, but the Medal of Honor recipient, Corporal Jason Dunham, who jumped on basically a grenade back in 2004 to save the lives of his fellow Marines, and succumbed to his wounds about 8 days later. So, David, again, thank you so much for being on the show today. It is an honor. Thank you. You know, obviously, goes without saying, thank you for your service, but more importantly, thank you for having the intestinal fortitude to continue sharing the difficult stories, because they are vital for other people's healing and vital for the education and information of everybody else out there. Because, you know, folks like Jason, you know, is more than just and that's why I wanted to go with the aspect of, you know, what's something that you learned about Jason, you know, because he's more than a medal. He was, you know, he was a son, he was a leader, he was, you know, we are more than what, you're more than a director, you're more than a veteran. You know, we are more than our labels, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's just so vital. And it's interesting because connecting to a lot of folks that are either in film or radio or writing books or whatever it is, I just think it's so vital. And not only that, for those that are still living and still dealing with the after effects of whether the folks that were with Jason, or maybe you talk about your school teacher, the KSOM veterans, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is a healing that happens. I know there's an aspect about reliving that, but when it's told, the story is told in a way that it can also help heal instead of ripping those wounds wide open.
That's interesting what you say, because that was one of my concerns going into this and reopening those wounds, right?
Yeah.
I've known these guys for so long, and they've told me things they don't tell their families.
Sure. Sure.
So I'm like, is this going to make it worse, me opening up this can?
Yeah.
And surprisingly, every interview I've done afterwards, these guys, they come up and give me a hug, and they're like, man, I needed to get that out. And I've seen it from the time we started shooting last year till now. I've seen that uneasiness, like, should I tell all these things, to, just following them on social media, I can tell it's affected them in a positive way.
Nice. Beautiful.
I mean, Castaneda, the kid who was the point man, sent me a picture on Veterans Day of him and his kids. And his interview was hard last fall. And he said, I wanted to share this with you today because my kids have asked me for years to go to their school for the Veterans Day program, and I've always shied away from it. But doing what you're doing and watching that trailer made me realize what Jason gave me. And he said it's these beautiful kids that call me dad. And he sent me that, and I had tears in my eyes when he sent me that. And I thought to myself, that's why we're doing this. It's awesome. Not about just being a documentary about a hero, but it's about that culmination of what comes afterwards, and that, because they're all growing, right, for the good. And just to see it happening before my eyes is just so rewarding, because that's why we're doing it.
Right. Well, beautiful. I I don't know if anything more impactful or more profound could be said other than that message there, like the purpose and how it's impacting those Marines in just such a positive and powerful way. Again, my guest today, David Kniess. Thank you so much, David, for being a guest on the Red, White News Show.
Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure, and we look forward to keeping tabs on the project, and we look forward to it. And then obviously we'll make sure the clip is up and all this great stuff. And then of course a message again to everybody else, if go check them out. And where can they do that if they want to? I know you got several platforms. Where can they check out the project?
Probably, Instagram seems to be the go-to place for a lot of people in the veteran community nowadays. So it's at the GIF documentary on Instagram, and the same tagline as that on Facebook.
Sure.
And they can find us on Twitter at the GIF doc. I post stuff almost every day. So.
Beautiful. And I know if you just Google it too, it'll pop up like 50 million times. So yeah. it's out there. You got to be blind to miss it. Well, thanks so much, David. I do appreciate it. And again, just thanks for what you do, and we'll connect to you later.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.